My stepdad left me alone in the hospital to go on vacation. I called my dad, and now CPS is involved because my mom wants me to lie. I can't stand my stepdad, Kevin. He's easily one of the most controlling, selfish, and downright frustrating people I've ever had to deal with. Ever since he married my mom, my whole world has been flipped upside down. To give you some background, my parents split up about 3 years ago. Honestly, it didn't come as a big shock. Mom and dad were constantly at each other's throats, arguing over just about everything. They were never really a good fit to begin with, and even though they tried to make the marriage work, the tension between them was always there, especially when it came to dividing up responsibilities at home. Even though my mom was technically a stay-at-home parent, she never really embraced the usual duties that come with that role. Things like cooking, cleaning, or even helping me out with schoolwork just weren't her thing, and she never pretended otherwise. Instead, she spent most of her time glued to her phone, chasing the dream of becoming some sort of beauty influencer. She was constantly posting videos or snapping selfies, even though her follower count was hardly anything to brag about. When she wasn't buried in her phone, she was usually out and about, shopping, getting brunch with her friends, or indulging in beauty treatments. And she didn't do this sparingly either. A big chunk of my dad's income went toward funding that lifestyle. She never really acted like a traditional mom, at least not the kind you'd expect to check in on your schoolwork or ask how your day went. Her main focus was always on herself, her appearance, her image, and she expected me to keep up with that too. She wanted me to stay skinny, always look polished, and basically act like I was an extension of her brand instead of being my own person. After the divorce, custody was split between both of my parents, so I spent time living with each of them. At first, it was a tough adjustment, bouncing between 2 different homes, but just when I was starting to find a rhythm, my mom met Kevin. From the very first date, she seemed completely taken with him. Within days, they were officially a couple, and not long after that, she introduced me to him. Suddenly, this guy I didn't know at all was a constant presence in our lives, and I was expected to welcome him with open arms. I might have been okay with that if he'd been a decent person. But that wasn't the case. Right off the bat, Kevin came in with all these absurd expectations. He just assumed I'd automatically accept him as my new dad, like he could step into that role without earning it. To me, he was a poor replacement for my actual father, and honestly, it felt insulting. He's always in my business, constantly criticizing me, nitpicking every little thing I do like he's on some mission to control me. He's got 2 sons of his own, and the way he treats me compared to them is night and day. If he even thinks I'm acting too girly, his words, not mine, he gets visibly annoyed. He's told me straight up that he doesn't think I should wear dresses or fitted skirts, like how I dress is somehow his decision. He also insists that I keep my long hair tied up in a bun all the time, like loose hair is some sort of offense. And that's not even the worst of it. If I have friends over, he'll always find an excuse to butt in. He claims he's just checking in, but it's never just a polite pop-in. He'll barge in and hang around, watching us like a hawk, making it clear he doesn't trust us to be alone. It's not just awkward, it's downright humiliating. When I ask him to give us some space, he laughs it off and says things like girls need constant supervision or tells me to just pretend he's not even there. It's infuriating. And the kicker? He never hovers over his own sons like that. They get to do whatever they want. I've tried talking to my mom about how much this bothers me, hoping she'd at least try to understand. But she just waves it off, saying he's only being protective. Like that somehow makes it okay. To make things worse, his 2 sons are an absolute nightmare to live with. They don't respect boundaries at all, and our personalities clash in every possible way. They're relentless when it comes to teasing and mocking me. Whether it's making fun of how I look or finding new ways to get under my skin, they never let up. And when I go to my mom for help, she brushes it off with, "That's just how siblings bond." As if bullying is some kind of love language. After just a year of dating, Mom announced she was marrying Kevin. She didn't ask how I felt, she told me straight up that she was going through with it no matter what. She said she loved him and was determined to make the marriage work. She knew I had concerns, but all she wanted from me was to go along with it, to not cause trouble, and to give Kevin a fair shot. It felt like a lot to ask, especially with how quickly everything was moving. But I didn't want to make things harder, so I agreed to try. I've honestly put in the effort, more than anyone gives me credit for. I've tried to adjust to Kevin's routines and get along with his sons, even though it's been anything but easy. But one thing I still can't get over is how Kevin insists I call him Dad. It feels so wrong. Every time I say it, I feel this knot of resentment tighten in my chest. I already have a dad, and I don't want to replace him. Kevin either doesn't get that or doesn't care. And maybe what hurts the most is how much my mom has changed since marrying him. It's like she's more of a mother to Kevin's boys than she ever was to me. She spends more time with them, helps them out with things she never even bothered to do for me, and acts like they're her real kids while I'm just some afterthought. Sometimes I wonder if I've completely lost my place in her life. I wish I could live with my dad, honestly. He's a lot more understanding, and I always feel more like myself when I'm with him. But he had to move to another city after landing a better paying job, so I stay full-time with Mom now. He still visits when he can, and we talk on the phone a lot. I've told him about everything going on, about Kevin, the boys, all of it. He listens. He really does. And he's been there for me in the ways he can, even from a distance. My dad even tried bringing up the situation with my mom, hoping maybe he could help smooth things over or at least get her to see how hard things had become for me. I truly believe he meant well, he just wanted to help, but every time he brought it up, Mom shut him down. She'd get defensive, telling him to stay out of her marriage and mind his own business. Still, I kept trying. Over the years, despite everything, I put in real effort to adjust to life with this new family. I tried to be patient with Kevin and his sons, hoping that if I stayed open-minded, maybe, just maybe, we'd find some kind of common ground and build something positive. But no matter what I did, I always felt like I was fading into the background. Like I was invisible in my own home. Then, earlier this year, something unexpected happened. Kevin got a promotion at work. He came home beaming with pride and announced that he'd be treating us all to a family vacation. At first, we were thrilled. It had been so long since we'd gone on a trip together, and the idea of getting away was exciting. Mom and Kevin picked the destination, booked the tickets, made all the arrangements, it was all set. But just one day before we were supposed to leave, things took a sharp turn. Mom and I were driving back home after picking out a few outfits for the trip when, out of nowhere, another car slammed into the back of ours. It wasn't some huge wreck, but the impact was strong enough to shake us up and cause real damage. Mom walked away with some bruises and scrapes, but I wasn't as lucky. I ended up with a fractured arm and a concussion. The ambulance showed up, and everything moved fast after that. I barely had time to process what was happening before I was admitted to the hospital for observation. When Kevin first heard about the accident, he rushed over to the hospital. For a moment, I thought maybe he actually cared, that he was genuinely worried about both of us. But pretty quickly, that hope started to fade. He kept circling back to the trip, obsessing over whether we'd still be able to go and stressing about how much money he'd spent. It was like the vacation was the only thing that mattered to him. Eventually, the doctors told us I'd need to stay in the hospital for a few days to monitor my concussion. Travel was completely off the table. Instead of showing compassion, Kevin looked annoyed, like I had personally ruined everything by getting hurt. It was as if the whole accident was some kind of inconvenience to him. Since I had to stay behind, my mom mentioned that she could cancel her part of the trip and stay with me, which gave me a bit of hope. I thought maybe she'd finally choose me over Kevin. But before I could even say anything, Kevin jumped in. He argued that the tickets were already paid for, and we were already losing money with me not going, so why waste even more by having Mom stay behind too? Then he turned to me and said that I was old enough to stay in the hospital by myself. He pointed out how hospitals are staffed 24/7, with doctors and nurses always around, like that was supposed to make me feel safe and comfortable. And just to top it off, he added that once I was discharged, he'd arrange for a babysitter to stay with me at home like I was some toddler, not a teenager recovering from an accident. I told him I wasn't okay with that. I didn't want to be alone in the hospital, and I definitely didn't want a random babysitter watching me when I was in pain. I begged my mom to stay with me. And to her credit, she did try. She told Kevin that leaving me like this wasn't right, that I needed someone with me. But Kevin kept pushing back. He said her staying would be a waste, that she'd just be sitting there doing nothing all day. As if offering emotional support to your injured child is meaningless. To him, losing a few $100 on plane tickets mattered more than whether I felt scared and alone. It was painfully clear in that moment he didn't see me as part of his family. I was just an afterthought. I pleaded with them. I told them I was only 15, that I shouldn't be left alone in a hospital. I was terrified, hurt, and the idea of facing all of that without anyone by my side was unbearable. So I tried suggesting a middle ground. Maybe Mom could call my dad and ask him to come stay with me. I knew he lived in another city now, but if he knew I was hurt, I was sure he'd come. I figured it was a way for Kevin and Mom to still go on their trip while making sure I wasn't completely alone. But Kevin didn't even consider it. He immediately shut me down, saying I was being dramatic and making a big deal out of a few minor injuries. He brushed off the idea of involving my dad, saying it would only stress him out for no reason. According to him, my broken arm and concussion were nothing, just things that would heal up fine in a few days. In the end, Kevin got his way, like he always does. I looked at my mom, hoping she'd finally take a stand. But instead, she gave in. Again. She agreed to leave. She stayed with me for just one night in the hospital. And for a brief moment, I let myself believe that maybe she saw how vulnerable I was, how badly I needed her there. Maybe she'd change her mind and stay. But the next morning, Kevin showed up to pick her up, all smiles, ready to head off on their little getaway. He didn't even ask how I was feeling. Once they left, I felt this heavy emptiness settle over me. I was alone in that hospital room, and for the first time in a long time, I couldn't hold back the tears. I tried to stay quiet, but one of the nurses noticed. She came over, sat with me, and after learning that I didn't have any family around, she kindly offered to call my mom. I told her not to bother, that they probably wouldn't answer, but she insisted. So instead, I gave her my dad's number. I wasn't sure what to expect. A part of me feared he might echo Kevin's words and tell me to tough it out. But the moment he picked up and the nurse explained everything, his voice changed. He sounded genuinely alarmed, more concerned than I'd heard him in years. And then he asked me, in this raw, stunned voice, "Wait, your mom actually left you behind to go on that trip?" I told my dad everything, how Kevin insisted it was totally fine to leave me behind because he didn't want the money spent on the trip to go to waste, and how mom just went along with it like it was no big deal. As I explained it all, I could feel his silence on the other end of the phone. He wasn't saying much, but I knew he was furious. His silence was the kind that simmers before it explodes. Then he told me something that just made my stomach drop. Mom had only told him we'd been in a minor fender bender. She completely downplayed everything. She never once mentioned that I had a broken arm, or that I'd suffered a concussion, or that she and Kevin were planning to leave me alone in the hospital. From what she told him, everything was fine, so he hadn't felt the need to reach out. Hearing that she'd actually lied to him, intentionally hiding how serious it was, made everything sting even worse. I already felt abandoned, but now I also felt betrayed. Dad didn't waste a second. He said he was dropping everything and driving straight to the hospital to be with me, no matter how long it took. And for the first time since being admitted, I felt something I hadn't felt in days: relief. Real, honest relief. Finally, someone cared enough to show up. Someone was treating this like it mattered. He got there in under 2 hours. And when I saw him walk into that hospital room, I broke down. I just started crying. He came over, hugged me, and told me everything was going to be okay. I believed him. He went straight to the nurses and doctors to ask questions, making sure he fully understood what I was dealing with. I could see the tension leave his face when they assured him my injuries weren't life-threatening, even though they were still pretty serious. He kept saying how sorry he was for not coming sooner, for trusting my mom's version of things, for not checking in with me directly. He was clearly beating himself up over it, and while I didn't blame him, it was clear he blamed himself. And then there was Kevin. My dad couldn't hide how angry he was with him. You could see it all over his face. He was absolutely livid that my stepdad had the nerve to treat me like an afterthought, to prioritize a vacation over my health and well-being. Kevin leaving me behind like that sent a very clear message: I didn't matter to him. I was just an inconvenience, something that got in the way of his plans. Dad tried calling Mom and Kevin, but of course, neither of them answered. That only made him angrier. He started pacing the room, swearing that this wasn't going to be ignored. He told me they were going to learn a serious lesson for what they'd done. He wasn't going to let it slide. He stayed with me in the hospital for the next 2 nights. Didn't leave my side once. He even took time off work just to make sure I was never alone. When I was finally cleared to go home, he didn't feel right about sending me back to Kevin's house, especially knowing I'd just be stuck there with some babysitter until everyone got back. So instead, he took me home with him. And I didn't argue. I wanted to be anywhere but there. Once I was settled in at his place, Dad tried reaching out to Mom again. This time, she actually picked up. And do you know what she said? That she missed his earlier calls because she was too busy having fun with Kevin and his sons. She didn't even sound guilty, just annoyed. That was it for my dad. He told her, very directly, that what she did was unacceptable. Leaving me alone in a hospital was beyond neglectful. He told her flat out that if he had to take legal action, he would. If it came down to it, he'd take her to court and fight for custody. He wasn't messing around anymore. He said he was fully prepared to report both her and Kevin for abandoning me like that. Since then, my phone hasn't stopped blowing up. Texts, calls, mostly from Mom and Kevin. But instead of apologizing or owning up to what they did, they've been accusing me of ruining their vacation. Kevin even had the nerve to say all of this could have been avoided if I just kept my mouth shut and stayed in the hospital quietly. According to them, I'm the one who caused all the trouble for speaking up, for letting my dad know what was really going on. I've been made to feel guilty for standing up for myself. Like I somehow threw them under the bus just by being honest about what happened. Update for everyone who's been asking. Now that I've had a little time to reflect and talk things through with my dad, I realize this wasn't some one-time mistake. There's been a pattern. For years, Kevin and my mom have been neglecting me, and I just stayed quiet, hoping it would get better. But it never did. Looking back now, I can't believe how much I tolerated. I let them treat me like I didn't matter, like my feelings were just noise. Take Kevin, for example. He's always tried to chip away at the bond one have with my dad. He'd constantly trash-talk him, calling him a deadbeat or saying he was useless just because he didn't like him. He always claimed my dad wasn't a good husband, so that gave him the right to insult him any time he wanted. And Mom? She never told him to stop. Not once. Whenever I had problems at home or tried to open up about how I was feeling, Kevin would just dismiss it. He'd say I was too sensitive or that I was blowing things out of proportion because I'm a girl. He even joked more than once that he was lucky to have only sons, like having a daughter was some kind of burden. And it wasn't just the words. It was the way he treated his sons like royalty while I was an afterthought. If they needed money, he handed it over without a second thought. But if I asked my mom for something, even something small, Kevin would butt in, asking a million questions and acting like I was wasting money. And let's not forget, it wasn't even his money. It was from my dad. So yeah, I felt like I had every right to spend some of it without being interrogated. We barely did anything as a family. Kevin and Mom would regularly make plans with his sons and leave me out entirely. They'd claim they didn't want to bother me or say they just needed some quality time without me. As if I didn't belong. As if my presence was just an inconvenience they had to work around. All those times they'd head out for dinner or go do something fun without even asking if I wanted to come, it always left me feeling like I didn't matter. Like I was just some extra they were stuck with. That's probably why I was so excited about the vacation in the first place, because it was rare for them to include me in anything at all. Kevin and my mom never made birthdays feel special either. They'd always say that since Kevin's sons didn't care much about their own birthdays, I shouldn't expect anything different. It was like, because it wasn't their tradition, I didn't deserve to feel celebrated. And when it came to gifts? They'd buy me things I didn't even like, stuff I'd never asked for. Things that felt thoughtless, like they barely knew me at all. Anytime I struggled with school, Kevin's response was always cold and dismissive. He'd say things like, "You're just lazy, that's your problem," or "Why even bother with school stuff?" Never once did he ask if I needed help or if something deeper was going on. It was always about how my problems were a hassle for him. And my mom? She just stayed quiet, like my pain wasn't worth speaking up for. She'd sit there, say nothing, and offer no comfort, nothing. Update 2. So, my dad ended up reporting Mom and Kevin to Child Protective Services. It wasn't a decision he made lightly, but after everything that happened, he couldn't just look the other way. Leaving me in the hospital like that wasn't just thoughtless, it was neglect, plain and simple. Once they got back from their trip, they were contacted by CPS. They had to sit down and answer a long list of questions about their decisions, their actions, and why they thought it was okay to leave an injured kid behind. I don't think they were ready for that kind of wake-up call. But CPS agreed with my dad, it was neglect. What they did wasn't just wrong, it put my well-being at risk. Later, my mom called me. She sounded angry, definitely not sorry. She told me I dragged her and Kevin into a mess, like I was the problem for telling the truth. She warned me that CPS would be reaching out to hear my side and then went on to try and convince me to lie. She said if I didn't lie, CPS might take me away from her permanently. She made it sound like I'd be destroying everything if I told them what really happened. I told her I wasn't okay with lying. I said maybe she should have thought about the consequences before she left me alone in a hospital bed. That's when she switched tactics, started guilt-tripping me, saying she'd given me so many years of her life and that now it was time I showed her some loyalty. Like being honest about how badly I was treated was some kind of betrayal. But what hit me hardest was when she said that lying would protect Kevin and his sons too. She admitted the CPS investigation could cause problems for Kevin, especially with his ex-wife. Apparently, she was afraid Kevin's ex might find out and use this as a reason to go after him in court. That's when it really sank in. Mom wasn't worried about me at all. She was more concerned with Kevin's reputation, with how this would affect his life, not mine. Not once did she ask how I was doing or if I'd recovered. She just begged me over and over to lie, to protect her family. But I'd had enough. I told her, flat out, I wasn't going to lie to anyone. I didn't care how it affected her or Kevin. They were the adults, they made their choices, and they needed to face the consequences. I told her I'd be honest with CPS and that I wasn't covering for anyone. That was it. She screamed at me, called me every name you can imagine, but I didn't back down. And even though I still feel guilty sometimes, deep down, I know I did the right thing. Update 3. It's been about 2 weeks since then. I've spoken to CPS and told them the truth about everything. For now, I'm staying with my dad, and honestly, it feels like a breath of fresh air. He's already looking into schools nearby so I can stay here with him permanently. Living with dad has been a complete change. It's peaceful. I'm not constantly on edge, second-guessing myself, or wondering if I'm a burden. He listens, he's supportive, and most importantly, he respects me. I can actually talk to him about how I feel, what I want, and he takes it seriously. CPS gave my mom a warning. They told her that her actions couldn't be ignored. She's now required to attend parenting classes and counseling to address the neglect and the damage in our relationship. Kevin didn't get off the hook either. He was heavily scrutinized, especially for what he did during the hospital incident. CPS made it clear that if I ever stayed with them again, they'd be monitoring everything closely. One wrong move, and it could lead to more serious consequences. Update 4. I can't believe it's already been 4 months since I moved in with my dad. It's like I've finally found a place where I can breathe. I'm not walking on eggshells every day. I'm not questioning my worth. For the first time in a long time, I feel safe. Living here has given me the space to heal. My dad supports me, talks with me, and treats me with the respect I never got at home before. I'm finally able to focus on school again, and I've even made some great friends. I feel like me again. Last month, for the first time in years, I actually had a real birthday party. I invited my friends over, we ordered pizza, and watched cheesy rom-coms all night. It was simple, but it was everything I'd always wished for growing up and never got when I lived with Mom and Kevin. As for Mom, things are still complicated. She's been texting a lot more lately, saying she's sorry and that she misses me. And sure, part of me feels bad for keeping my distance. But then I remember everything that happened, how she left me behind, how she tried to guilt me into lying, how she cared more about protecting Kevin than protecting her own child. I've set boundaries. I told her I'm not ready to come back. If she truly wants to fix things, then she's got to take responsibility first. No more guilt trips. No more pretending like none of it happened. Kevin still hasn't apologized. Honestly, I didn't expect him to. He never really treated me like I mattered in the first place. What he did, especially leaving me in the hospital, is something I'll never forget. Whether he ever changes or not doesn't matter to me anymore. I'm not waiting around for that. What I've learned is this: I don't need people who only care when it's convenient. I've got my dad, I've got real friends, and I've got myself, and that's more than enough.